Okay, ready? And 3, 2, 1.
Hi, and welcome back to Cadence Podcast. I'm Katarina.
And I'm Michael.
Today's episode, we'll just, dive right in, is our second episode, and we're really excited to be back. Today is all about creativity.
Yep.
Where we're the most creative, what creativity has to do with sleep, and anything creativity.
I think creatives are sort of interesting creatures.
Mm-hmm.
I think everyone is a creature of habit, but I feel like creatives sometimes get into a rhythm that people find either interesting or cool or weird or abnormal, if you will. But we want to dive deeper into that because we've had lots of discussions on why I'm so creative in the way that I am and why you're creative in the way that you are. And I think a lot of people can relate to that.
But before we dive into that, we have a segment on our podcast that has to do with anything like current news, anything exciting that we've heard, seen.
Stuff that we find interesting.
Yeah.
And it is called The New Cadence.
And this week
is my turn. Yeah, it's my turn. So let's not try to ruffle the feathers too much with this topic because I do think it's controversial. Controversial. And that's because in the news lately, and for a little while now, I have found that everyone has been talking about AI.
Sure, yeah. Of course.
And so just quickly, right off the top, there have been insane amounts of AI development. It is moving at lightning speed. And recently they have released ChatGPT 4, I believe, and the new Midjourney, which is sort of the photography tool. And I believe it's Midjourney 5, if I'm not mistaken. But I've played around with it. OpenAI Labs is the people who are creating ChatGPT and a sort of a photography tool called Dolly, and then Midjourney is a different one. But what was interesting is I read recently that ChatGPT, and if you're not aware of what it is, it's essentially a chatbot, but it's being integrated into their workflow by Microsoft.
Which is crazy to me.
And Microsoft also owns Bing.
Mm-hmm.
And when was the last time you heard of Bing? Do you even know what Bing is?
I've seen it, I guess, on movies, but that was maybe a long time ago.
Bing is essentially Microsoft's version of Google. Yeah, exactly. And Yahoo and all that. But they've integrated in a way where you can use it for Microsoft Teams and you can use it in Microsoft Office. And whether we like AI or not, it's here. We've let the genie out of the bottle and it's not going anywhere. So as someone who is a photographer and a filmmaker, yes, that can be very scary for what I do. But I also think a lot of times when new technology is being developed and being forced into mainstream, if you will, you also have to evolve yourself.
Yeah.
Right? Remember when it was first talked about that we could pay with our phones?
I mean, you introduced me to it.
Yeah. For the longest time, Katarina's like, I don't want my credit card information. And
no, I just didn't know about it.
Yeah. But a lot of people, like my parents, are like, you can have your all your money information on your phone. Unfortunately, these advancements and developments are going to happen. So I think as a creative with these AI tools, there needs to be legislation, and that is for sure. Because I don't want some of the stuff that I've created or the photos that I've taken being taken out of context or used in a way that is without my permission. But I do think that at the end of the day, it still requires a vision. And I do think that humans have the most powerful vision. I really do believe in that.
Because I think ultimately humans, and that's what separates us from animals, we can imagine something that has never been there before. And I don't think AI can do that. It can,
but it's getting there.
But it still pulls from things that have existed.
Do you think it will get to a place where it can pull from nothing?
I found this on the web.
Speaking of which,
Speaking of technology,
do you think it can pull from nothing?
I can't imagine that right now, so I don't know.
Yeah, and I actually do.
Yeah.
So that's going to be interesting, and we'll leave it there for now. But comment below in the comment section. What do you think of AI? Are you sick of hearing about AI? Is it becoming like this sort of, as soon as you hear the word NFTs, are you just like ugh, or are you excited about it and excited on figuring out how to utilize it the best you possibly can can use it? Because I think there might be a place for it, especially when we run into a blockade.
And I've used it multiple times.
Just to kind of to generate a bit of an idea or a spark, right? But yeah, we'll leave it there for now. I do want to say a little bit on the technology and being creative. Like Katarina just got this Apple Watch, and it's been around forever now. But again, it's like, people are slow to adopt things at certain times, I feel. And this whole AI thing is going to be one of those things. But how has your experience been with Apple Watch? Because for a long time, you and I were both against Apple Watches because at the end of the day, always being plugged in and getting notifications was something that you were very, very, very against. And you felt like having the Apple Watch would
do exactly that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've actually experienced the opposite. And yes, I can feel any notification because I have vibration turned on.
You can turn it off. Yes.
Yes, but that's how I have it set up right now. So it's right there at all times. But I actually feel like I am using, or I am looking at notifications less. Because it is a smaller screen, it is a little more cumbersome to look at your messages and everything. And there's apps that I don't have on here, of course, like Instagram, TikTok, whatever. And those are the apps that I spent the most time on. So I actually feel less plugged in, even though I am plugged in at all times.
Yeah, because I feel like for you, you get the notifications that you need to get, like a message from your mother or your family or myself, but then you don't get distracted by looking at that text message from your mom and then instantly moving on to TikTok or Instagram or whatever.
Yes, because once you've picked up your phone, it's so easy to go into social media and whatever.
Your phone is a black hole.
Yeah, and today we've left the house a couple of times, and every time I left my phone at home. So there wasn't even the option for me to look at social media while I was out because I didn't have it with me. And I think because you have the cellular version of it, you're able to do that. So I guess what you're trying to say is if you want to be a little more free of your phone, get the cellular one.
Yeah. I mean, we're not sponsored by Apple or anything, but hey, Apple,
if
you're listening. Okay, so let's dive into the first topic
of the day.
Yeah.
Which is, we need technology for this.
Yeah.
Okay, so we said today is all about creativity.
Right.
And the first thing that we thought would be interesting to talk about is what creativity has to do with bathrooms.
Yes. And that sounds really interesting and kind of weird.
Weird, yeah.
But one night I was sitting there with Katarina after I had finished having a shower.
Yeah.
And I was just at this, like, I was working on some concepts and some ideas, and I just had told her a little bit about it previously, but then I just was at like this creative peak, this creative height. And she was like, man, like your ideas are just flowing right now.
Yeah, coming. And it was crazy.
And I feel like one of the reasons why I get that way is because I have nowhere to go. Yeah. Like I have nothing to do but be in this one place with myself and my own thoughts.
Exactly.
And there's no distractions because you can't do anything else. Like when you're having like people say bathroom, but for me specifically,
the shower.
It's the shower, which is strange because I'm standing there and I'm doing this sort of mindless action, which is just having a shower, but yet my brain is moving and being able to flesh out blockades and ideas and things that I'm not able to do when I'm sort of working and worrying about the next thing. I don't know. It's a very strange thing.
So that's actually really interesting because something that I've heard recently, I guess it's two things. One is, of course, about bathrooms, but the other one is something called Think Week. Have you heard of that before?
Think Week? No.
So it's this whole idea of moving away from distractions, moving away from screens, moving away from being actually out of your house and doing something. So people like, for example, Bill Gates do something called a Think Week. So once a year, they sort of lock themselves into a certain space, could be a cabin in the woods or whatever, and they make sure that there's no distractions at all, that they can just sit, write on a piece of paper, sit with themselves, sit with their thoughts. And that's where a lot of entrepreneurs and creatives come up with the best ideas.
And they implement this themselves.
Yes.
It's not a thing. It's not like a thing where everyone goes to this like.
No, it's like solitude. Yeah. So it's like instead of going on vacation, he books himself a week off to just do nothing.
Yeah. And what's interesting, and that leads me to what I found recently, and why the whole being in the shower with no escape all by myself makes sense to me. And I heard this quote, and it is by, it was on Twitter, and it was by Dan Coe, and it says, "Don't expect to tap into your creative potential if you never are alone with yourself.
That's exactly
No
it.
work, no people, no information. Sit with yourself, let thoughts trigger thoughts, and follow them down a rabbit hole of original discovery."
That's great. That's exactly the same concept.
I guess it is, right? Like the concept of Think Week, I guess, is the execution of this idea that if you are never comfortable with being alone, by yourself, with zero distractions at all, forcing yourself to figure out where you want to go creatively or what hurdle you need to get over to accomplish that creative goal or bust through that creative block.
Yeah.
Then
and think about it, coming back to the idea of the shower, that is one of the only times in our day where we just are being and not doing anything. Like, yes, you are doing, like at some point you're washing your hair, washing your body, whatever, but sometimes we also just stand there.
Yeah.
And what other time in your day could you say that you're just being without looking at your phone, going to the bathroom,
it's rare.
making food? Like,
I mean, yeah, because when you're cooking, you're dealing with that, and when you're editing, like you can get into a flow state, and I think that's why sometimes people talk about a flow state.
Yeah.
Because when you're painting or when you're editing or when you're drawing or when you're writing, it's almost like you are just alone in your thoughts, right? Like when I'm in a flow of editing a photo or editing a video or whatever, it's like everything else is gone. And I'm just worried about putting together those next pieces. It's when the creative block for me comes the most when I'm reaching a fork and I don't know where I want the story to go. And there's just too many ideas. Yeah. And there's this creative block of like, it's not clear, and you're trying too many things. And it's like that multiple distractions, multiple ideas that start to create a bit of a cluster.
Yeah. And it's like, and even still, when you're editing, you're following a pattern because you have a goal that you want to achieve. And I think a space where like something new and novel, like we also just talked about with AI, when does that really come in? And that comes in when there's nothing else happening. Those are the moments. And that's why in the shower, I actually have to read you something about that.
Yeah.
Why that it's so interesting. So I'm sure I'm going to butcher his name, John Cunios. He's a professor of psychology. And he wrote a book called The Eureka Factor, Aha Moments, Creative Insight in the Brain. And he says, I'm going to just read it out because I thought it was so interesting. It was specifically about why people are creative in the shower. And it says...
It was a book specifically about people being creative in the shower.
No, it's about aha moments, but the specific section is about
being creative in the shower.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And it says, not only does the warm water elevate your mood, you focus your attention inward. You have some mild sensory deprivation. You can't see very much. There's the white noise of the water. The water is warm, so you can't feel the difference between your skin and the air. This sensory restriction is like an extended brain blink. You cut out the outside worlds and ideas bubble into awareness.
That is, honestly, it's so wild because I feel like when I go to plan creative concepts, whether that be for YouTube or a project that I'm working on with the creative agency or things that you and I are doing, I have these ideas very, like, for me personally, very surface level. It's like, here is sort of the idea. But the way I explain it, do you want a little sip here?
Thank you.
The way I explain it is that when I'm in the shower, it feels like that. It feels like I'm in like this little vacuum, and that little thought process of whatever idea I had for like a video or a concept or whatnot just starts to go, and it's like I can visualize the entire video or movie or whatever. It's like it flashes through completely, and it's like I know exactly what I want to capture. And so I have a very clear vision once I get out. And then after that, it's about just executing it, getting the right shots, creating that shot list. But it's like I can see the whole thing, like start, end. I can fully see it. And it happens, again, I always say to you, I'm like, man, it happens every time in the shower. And that makes a lot of sense. And
it also made me think, and I didn't do any like further thinking, it's just something because it came up in the quote. Do you think in like those sensory deprivation tanks, something similar could happen?
I think so. I think if you're in a really big rut of some sort, one of those like deprivation tanks could really help you do that. I mean, I've never done one. Have you done one before?
No, never.
I mean, for me, the claustrophobia might be a thing. Like the shower is kind of expansive and it's normal. Like we're used to that. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. For me, most of the times these days when I'm having a shower, what's helped me most is actually almost like write the monologue. Because usually when I'm planning a section in a film or video and I need to spiel out an opening dialogue, monologue, or whatever that might be, I usually have a really hard time just sitting at a desk and writing it down. But for some reason, when I'm in the shower, it just flows really smoothly.
Yeah.
And then I basically have it all, and then I just need to quickly get to a desk and jot it all down, and then. But I mean, in this day and age, I could probably pull up ChatGPT and be like, "Hey,
do this for me.
Write this monologue about this for me." You know, I don't know, but I don't know.
What's interesting for me though is like, I am not. When I'm in the shower, there's also a lot happening in my brain.
Like what?
Like, for me, it's more like, I have to do this, I have to do that. It's like, it's this freeing space as well where things that I want to do or have to do come up. But what's really interesting is as soon as I exit that space, unless I write it down right away, it's gone for me. But I wonder if that has to do with the fact that it's less of that creative thinking that's happening in my brain and it's more that like sequential.
Yeah. Like the way you describe it is more like it's like you're trying to reference tasks that you have to complete.
Yeah.
And for me, it's not like that at all. It's more of like a euphoric thought process. And that goes to show how completely different you and I are in the way that we think and operate. But that leads me to the question, like, everybody is creative in their own way, right? Like they have a creative way of maybe expressing themselves. Like, do you believe that? Do you believe that everyone is creative or no?
Yes.
To a degree in different ways.
Yeah.
They're either creative with their fashion, but they can't really visualize a scene in a movie, or someone who's really great at taking a photo isn't great at writing creatively, or cooking, or whatever that might be. So where do you think you feel you are the most creative for you? Like if mine is I'm most creative in the shower, then where is it for you?
You mean a space where I'm the most
creative? Yeah, like what makes what gives you that space to be the most creative then? If mine is just being stuck in the shower, and then my senses are heightened, if you will, according to that book. Mine
is being by myself in the mornings with a piece of paper and a pen. So I for sure need that element of solitude as well.
Yeah.
And no distractions. But I am less of a do all the work up here and it stays here sort of person. I'm more of I become creative and I process information in a creative way by putting it down onto a piece of paper.
Yeah. And for me, like at the end of the day, I also need to write it down, because I think there's so much going on that I will forget it. But I feel like my ideas are flushed out in full when I'm in that creative space.
For you, it's different. You have the ideas in the shower and then you just need to record them. And for me, they are unfolding while I am writing it down. That's where the thoughts come up for me.
Yeah. So do you think, because we're talking about the shower specifically, and in that book it all says because of the warm water and blah, 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 and yada, yada. Do you think there's other spaces in the bathroom that leads people to have the same sort of effect or feeling? Because it's so funny. I know people who, and then like, they have told me that they get all their creative ideas when they're number two.
And I was just, that was one of the
like, I don't know how else to put it eloquently, but
that was one of the things I was going to say. And the other one I was going to say was brushing your teeth.
Yeah, because it's like a mindless action.
Yes. But both of those, you can still distract yourself by looking at your phone, for example.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, because most people aren't taking their phone into the shower, right? Like,
yes.
I mean, they could.
Oh, speaking of that, I forgot one thing that I read today is there are companies that are developing waterproof whiteboards so that in the shower you can write down your ideas.
I feel like I've heard of that.
While they come up.
Yeah.
I thought was crazy.
Yeah, I feel like I've heard of that, where you could like just slap it to the wall and you're like, ooh, and then quickly write it down. Because for me, I have it like sort of locked into my brain, but with someone like you who, let's say,
I come out of it with a to-do list on a whiteboard.
Which is so funny.
Yeah.
I would like to know, like, do you resonate with this vibe? Like, for everyone listening, I mean, I'm such a podcast newbie. Can you leave comments in podcasts?
No.
You can't?
No.
Interesting.
Just no.
I mean, this is also, for just quickly, for everyone who doesn't know, we're doing this as a video podcast on YouTube, but also all the podcast platforms.
Yeah.
But man, I really want to know, to everyone listening or watching this, does that resonate with you? Are you the most creative in the show? Is it
just us? Is it just
it's definitely not just us, because obviously we've seen that it's being put into practice with the book excerpt that you read about the shower, the Think Week, the little Twitter quote that I have found.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. It's something that we have wanted to, like, for me personally, I wanted to figure out, like, why is it that that is the place that I'm the most creative? And then I think your book explained it the best.
Yeah.
And what is that book called again?
It is called...
just for everybody listening, in case you want to read it.
The Eureka Factor, Aha Moments, Creative Insight, and the Brain.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy.
We'll put that in the show notes so that you can find the book if you're looking for it. But yeah, that's really cool.
So the other thing that I think we wanted to bring today that has to do with creativity is...
Creatives don't sleep.
Creatives don't sleep.
Yeah.
Don't sleep, or don't sleep enough.
Yeah.
You were one of those people.
I was one of those people. And I guess what I will say is, at the top of the show, we said that creatives are unique creatures.
Yes.
And we have a different rhythm, different habits, because oftentimes a creative has the ability to have a schedule that isn't 9 to 5. You know, I think there can be creatives who work in a 9 to 5 job, but even those creatives, when they come home, at some point, that creativity reignites because they think about something during the day from their 9 to 5 where they had a little bit of a stuck or a blockade, and then they jump in the shower and then it reignites, and then suddenly they're in this creative mode again, and then that leads them to not be able to sleep.
Yeah.
Because they need to get those ideas out so that they can go into the next day, if it's a 9 to 5 job, to like flush them out. Or someone like me, I think this sort of ties back to what we were just talking about, but oftentimes when I'd be working on a project or something, during the daytime, it was just too full of distractions, too many cars, too many sounds, too many people sending text messages or calling, or there'd be available shows to watch. But for some reason, when the night fell and it started to become 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and the world started to slow down, people started to go to sleep, everything got quiet, was when I just got really creative, and I would just start jumping into an edit like at 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, and I would edit till 4 or 5, 6 in the morning.
So let me ask you a question. Like, I agree with that idea of it is so beautiful to be doing work and getting into it when everyone else is sleeping.
Yeah, when there's just nothing, there's no one around.
But for me, I'm the type of person that gets up at 5 a.m. and does it before my 9 to 5 job.
Yeah.
Would that work for you as well? Or is it specifically that sweet spot of when everyone is going to sleep and you stay awake?
And yeah, and that's the thing. I've thought about that. Like in the past, I've been like, why don't I just get up earlier? This is in the past. I've broken that cycle, and I'll talk about that in a second. But I think the difference is, if I were to get up at 4 a.m., it's about the world waking up and me, and it's like I'm focused and then I lose it. Versus in the evening, I'm focused and I get deeper into it.
Because
it gets even
quieter and quieter.
Exactly. It keeps it's like around 9 or 10 it gets quiet, but then it gets really quiet at 3 or 4 or 5 in the morning. Whereas if I were to wake up at 4 in the morning, it is quiet, but then it starts to fade. The sun starts to rise, and it's like you get distracted, you know? Because the night, I don't know, like this is like some epic movie quote, but the night is long, you know? Like it starts to get quiet at 10 and gets even darker and darker, and you have those 8 hours of darkness to deal with.
So what?
And by the way, before we get even deeper into this, I hated it. Like I absolutely hated the fact that I would have to, my brain and my body would only start to get creative at 9 or 10, and then I would continue and finish these edits until 4, 5, 6 in the morning. Like I absolutely hated it, because truth be told, I enjoy the mornings. I enjoy waking up and having that coffee and going out for the day and just really enjoying the day. Because as weird as it is, I'm inspired the most by the day of things happening around me, seeing
But then
people.
you take that and bring it into the night. That's when you, like, that fuels you throughout the day, but then at night you like...
The daytime is the gasoline for my creativity in the evening.
Yeah.
And that is the effed up part.
So let me ask
And that's why creatives, to me, they have a hard time sleeping.
So, yeah, speaking of sleep, what was the last, like, can you remember that one night where you stayed up? Like, what was the latest you ever went to bed after a long night of editing or being...
When the sun came up, whatever time that was.
And then...
Like, I would sit at my desk and I would edit and edit and edit and edit. I think one night, like, as an example, I think I was working on a project, and it was like 4 in the morning, and then suddenly it was 6 in the morning, and I just, you keep tweaking it and adding, layering the sound design or the color grade. And I remember very clearly, at the time I was living in a high rise, and I was really high up. I was like on the 30th story, and I was editing, and I had these big windows, and the sun kind of rises just behind those windows. And I remember, because it was dark, I had all the blinds up, so it didn't matter.
Of course.
And then suddenly I could see these rays of light starting to peek through the windows, and I'm just like, oh no. Then I remember jumping into bed and pulling down all the blackout shades so that I could sleep. And I think it was like 7 a.m. or whatever. And I'm like, man, I need sleep. So it was like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Like I slept till maybe just before noon. And then I woke up to enjoy the rest of the day and meet up with other creators or people. And I felt tired a lot. Like I constantly felt tired during that time period.
So on an average night, would you get, you would say
4 hours, 5 hours.
Okay. So
I would say that's not good.
Yeah.
But I'd say that's actually more than a lot of other creatives that I know who only sleep like 3 hours a night.
I brought another little piece of research about this.
Kat's such a researcher. It's funny.
So I don't know if you guys have heard of the book Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker, but he's sort of a sleep expert. I don't think he has formal education in like sleep or whatever, but he has become so interested in the topic that he's written that book. He's been on a million podcasts, done TED Talks, whatever. And he has done a couple of such interesting experiments with sleep.
For himself?
No, with research groups.
Yeah.
Where there is significant difference in just 1 hour when you lose 1 hour of sleep. Mm-hmm. So let's say 7 hours compared to 8 hours is a significant difference in your performance the next day. And one example of that is, and which is tonight, daylight savings.
Yeah, it's funny. We're recording this on daylight savings, and we actually lose an hour tonight.
Yeah, and
it'll be spring forward.
And I have to actually look at the numbers because it's insane. He says daylight savings time, spring, when we lose an hour of sleep, they see a 24% increase in heart attacks the next day, as well as similar numbers for car crashes and suicide rates. Mm. And it is the opposite. It is a 21% less car crashes, heart attacks, whatever, in the fall when we gain an hour of sleep, which to me is so wild. And he even went a little further, and we all know that sleep is good for your brain, sleep is good for your body in a lot of different ways, but he says it can actually affect your genes, like your DNA on a like a cellular gene level. Yep. And they did another sort of experiment where they put people on a 6 hour of sleep schedule for a week compared to a group that had 8 hours of sleep. And he says for the 6 hour group, 711 genes distorted in their activity. So that just means they changed their activity, and the, let's say, good genes that are responsible for your immune system, whatever, they went down in activity, and the genes that are responsible to produce like cancer cells and tumors and whatever increased in their activity during that week. Yeah, which to me is just crazy.
And it's a 2 hour difference.
Yeah, it's just a 2 hour difference for a week.
I mean, I'm having a hard time digesting that, and I know a lot of people will too. I don't know, but I know a lot of people who perform high level on that 6 hours or whatever. And so I'm wondering, like what does that actually mean? Like, you know what I mean? Is it like 10 years off your life? Is it a year off your life? Because for some people, they might be like, yeah, if it's a year off my life difference, then, and I can do more with just 6 hours of sleep, then that's fine.
Totally. I get it. Like he doesn't go into,
of course not.
I haven't read the book, but what he does say is, for example, when it comes to your reproductive health for men, the sperm activity of people who have only 6 hours of sleep compared to those with 8 hours of sleep, that's usually the comparison that he makes, is the ones with only 6 hours of sleep have the sperm activities of people with their age like who were 10 years older, you know?
I get it.
So
people who have 6 hours of sleep at 30 years of age, and people with 8 hours of sleep at 30 years of age, the people who only have 6 hours sleep have a sperm count or activity of someone who is 40. So it feels like they've aged 10 years on basically just having less sleep. Yeah, I mean, I get it. And I think the reason why he does that comparison of 6 and 8 is that is a common number. A lot of people are like, I'm good off 6 hours of sleep. I've heard that so many times.
So many times. I only need 6 hours.
I'm like so many times of entrepreneurs or friends. There's like, yeah, they're like, I just need 6 hours and I'm good.
And it's so interesting to me. I've worked with a coach before, and I remember when she and I were talking, I don't remember the exact topic, but I was like, yeah, but I sometimes feel like I'm not doing enough. Like I'm trying to build something for myself, but I'm still like going to bed early and waking up at a decent time. And like you see all these entrepreneurs who only get 6 hours of sleep and they pride themselves of like working through the nights, pulling all-nighters. And she's like, yeah, but that's just not sustainable. Like you can do that for a certain amount of time, I guess, but then at least in her opinion, at some point you're burned out and you can't sustain that. So that was interesting to me.
I think that's the one big thing that I wanted to get into was that though I felt like I still could operate fairly normally, like doing this editing late into the night, I wouldn't often do those sunrise, sun would come up and I still felt like even if I edited to 4 or 5 in the morning, that affected me like in a way that I would get burnt out easily. And if I did that for like 5, 6, 7 days straight, 2, 3 days in a row, I would just do nothing. And by nothing, it's like I didn't even want to go out or see people or even enjoy life. So fortunately for me, and as a creative who is in that routine and sort of is in a bit of that rut, if you will, find yourself someone who is not in that routine. And most likely you will fall out of that routine easily because you are the type of person where before you were with me,
I would go to bed at 9 p.m.
and she would wake up at 5 or 6.
Yeah.
But when we started dating and then eventually when we got married, we've just come to a place where we've accepted that, hey, I can't go to bed at 9. My brain just doesn't shut off that way. So we've landed on 10 or 11. And then for you now, instead of getting up at 5, you'll like sleep until 6 or 7.
Yeah.
So, and we always make sure that it's that 8-hour number.
Yeah.
Right? Like sometimes you're missing half an hour here or there, but we always make sure that it's like if we're in bed at 11, our alarm's up for 7.
Yeah.
If we're in bed at 10, our alarm's up for 6. We just try to maximize on those 8 hours. And if I think a lot of people might say like, well, how has your creativity been?
I was just going to ask you, how does it feel any different for you? And not maybe necessarily for creativity, because I don't know what sleep does to creativity, but on your overall like...
Yeah, so the best way I can describe it is that in terms of me getting my work done and being creative, I don't think it's necessarily changed, but I do sometimes feel like it takes me a little bit longer because I have to force it through during the daytime.
I get it. I totally get it.
Whereas sometimes if I need to get a project done, it's happened before too. Like with us when we've been together, when I've had a video I need to finish or a project I need to finish, I'll say to you like, hey, I need a couple hours in the evening to do it because the world is much quieter, and I will edit until like 1 or 2, and then I'll jump into bed with you after. It's because like there are moments, depending on the project and depending on the timing and depending on the intricacy of it, I still need that.
Yeah.
So I'll still be like, I'll get most of it done, but then there are just parts of it where I'm like, I really need to get those things finished.
Yeah.
Right. And unfortunately, because we don't own a studio where there's a blackout room.
Yeah.
Sometimes the color grading, I have to just do it in the evening. And so I'll leave that to the evening. And sometimes, it takes longer. And there have been nights where I've crawled into bed at 2 or 3 still. I try not to do that very often, but it still does happen. I think it's going to be inevitable for creatives in the field of maybe filmmaking. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think as a photographer, maybe you could start to change the habit, or a graphic designer.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Like, there's been days, and again, I'm the opposite. I would then get up earlier instead of working late.
I've done that too.
And I've done that. Like, there's been times where I've said, like, oh, I have to sit at my desk at 7 a.m. because that is when nobody's distracting me, because by 8:30, my messages and emails are rolling in. So I need that little bit of time before to get something done that needs my full attention. Yeah.
I think and I could be wrong, but I think a lot of people will say the reason why it's harder for them to get up super early to do it is like that waking up and being groggy and then getting to a creative mindset feels harder.
And there's a time limit. Like, if like you said before, if I get up at 7 and I know by 8:30 I'm going to be distracted, there's that pressure that I only have that hour and a half where I have to perform.
Exactly.
And again, when you do it into the night, there is no end.
No one's,
really.
yeah. And your brain is already kind of firing, and you're just ramping all the way through.
Yeah.
And it's like when you're doing it in the morning, it's like you have to like ramp up, and in the evening you're already at your high and you're just continuing through and just forcing it through. But then you get this like this crash.
But it's the interesting, that's also personality. I am the most up and there right in the morning.
Yeah.
And we always say, like, I start here in the morning and my energy goes this way.
Yeah, you're like a battery, right? Like you start at 100
like a battery.
and you fully just drop down to 0, and then at like 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, you need to go to bed.
So by 10 p.m., there is nothing that I can give. Mm-hmm. So I cannot be creative or work at that time. And for you, it's different. You're more of a wave, I guess, maybe.
Yeah. No, totally. Like throughout the day, I'm like a wave. I'm like, I get energized, and then I get this dip, and then it just goes up and down. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure it would be interesting to, if we ever have the opportunity to bring on a professional, or bring on guests in general to this small little project that we're doing here, that we can talk to some people who have a little bit more insight on this, because we're both creatives in different ways, but we don't have insight on the precise ticks of that. I only know from my experience how I am, and
we can just pull on information that we find.
Yeah, and you have but that is interesting. But I think that is like almost everything that we've had to talk about. Was there anything else that you needed or wanted to talk about in terms of why creatives are so creative? Or
no, I think creativity in general is such like an interesting, I don't even know what I want to call it, like a topic, or
it's a trait.
Like a trait or a skill set or mindset, or I don't know.
Do you think that creativity is a trait, or do you think it's like naturally embedded in somebody? Like, sorry, that's the same.
Yeah.
Do you think like it's a trait that's naturally embedded in somebody, or do you think it's a skill, as you mentioned, a skill set?
I think you can train to you can apply techniques to spark your creativity.
Okay.
But I believe that creativity is, some people are born with it, and some people will have to work hard to get to a certain place and apply techniques. So I guess
do you think they can be equally as good?
I don't know.
For me personally, I believe that in terms of creative execution, being able to get an image to look a certain way, being able to cut the fabric a certain way, to being able to paint straight lines in a certain way, I think those are all skills that can be learned and is a part of your skill set. Mm-hmm. But I do believe that there are some people who have this natural ability to create something that someone else hasn't necessarily done before. I think it's also a skill set to be able to copy someone else's or be inspired by someone else's work to make your work look similar. And that's a whole different topic, like copying, stealing, like, you know, the great artist, the greatest artist steal, all that kind of stuff. But like, I do believe that you can be inspired by other people, and then that sparks your own creativity, and you can get really good at doing something similar or something sort of in your lane. Yeah. But I think there are just some people naturally who can see something and be creative with it right away on the spot, without having to like think too much about it
and work hard for it,
and like and work and force the scene or force the, like, you know what I mean? Like, they can look at a person and be like, that outfit looks amazing on you. Boom, you're good. Rather than someone who has been trained to outfit someone to look good.
Yeah, I'd be more the person. I think I'm more the former. The latter. Sorry. I'm more the one that's like, okay, so I'm supposed to come up with a creative scene. And then I'd go to my computer and be like, how do you come up with XYZ? Like, I would have to force it so much more than probably you, because you can sit there and write there. You could just like imagine something that's never been there before.
It is an interesting topic because I'm involved with so many creatives, and I'm the type of person who's inspired by every type of creative. Someone who has been really well trained, someone who's just naturally chaotically creative. Mm-hmm. And for me personally, anyone's creativity just drives my own creativity, and I just implement it in my own specific way. Yeah. And sometimes that way is through what I've learned, and it's like a skill set that I've obtained. But some of it is just through sort of my natural instinct. Yeah. And I think that is like the difference between the two. One is like a skill set, and one is an instinct. Yeah. And I'm fortunate that I don't know if it's fortunate's the right word, but like I'm fortunate that like I'm not just, my instinct isn't way up here and it's like I'm just this like super gifted creative, and my skill set isn't like way up here and I'm just this ultra high level skill person. I'm kind of like I'm a little bit more balanced, for better or for worse. Yeah. Right? Because some of the people who are naturally outrageously gifted are just like have changed the world and in their own ways, and some people who have highly skill set. And I guess I'm becoming more comfortable with being just really, really, really good. Yeah. Rather than like out of this worldly, right? Like when I was much younger, all I wanted to be was out of this worldly creative, but not everyone can be that. But I am proud that I can often execute things at a very high level and creative. And I'm fortunate that I have you to be able to balance me in the way that like you're more like structured in a lot of ways. Yeah. But to finish this off, because we are so different, I've talked a lot about like my abilities. What do you think it is about you when if someone says to you, like, are you a creative? How do you answer that question?
I would say I might not be creative in what the everyday person thinks a creative person is. Mm-hmm. But I think where my creativity comes in is how I approach life. Mm-hmm. With life, to me, there are no boundaries. And I think in creativity, someone who's very creative doesn't see boundaries. They Absolutely just think not. Beyond what other people see as possible. Mm-hmm. And that is how I approach my life. When someone says like, at some point in your life, like that back in the day when I would just move around the world and live anywhere, everyone would always say like, at some point, that's an adventure that's going to end.
Yeah, at some point you're going to have to settle down in that 9 to 5. At some point you're going to have to stay in the small town Germany.
What life is about, and that is just normal. And like, this will end. This is an adventure, and you can't do this forever. And
you can't be that backpacking 20-year-old forever.
Yeah, and I kept saying to them, I'm like, but why not? Or when someone would say to me like, why are you moving abroad? Because they couldn't see why anyone would do that and what that would do for someone, I would say, but why not? Yeah. So it's, I guess, more of that overall creative approach to life in general.
Yeah. And I think with that, we sort of wrap up this episode.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for watching.
And listening.
And I hope that you found this episode insightful from some of the stuff that we have brought and shared today. As two people who work in the creative field, who see life in a creative way, that is the main goal of Cadence Podcast, is for people to live as fully and as creatively and as passionately as you possibly can. So don't forget to rate this podcast 5 stars.
Yes.
Anywhere you can find it. Like, share, subscribe if you're watching on YouTube. And we appreciate the support.
And we hope you come to our next one.
Yep. So we'll see you in the next episode. That's pretty much it.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye.